Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the April 9th meeting of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Thank you all for joining us. We have a full agenda today. I did want to mention that we have new accessibility features as part of the meeting. We'll have a closed captioning option. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there is a live transcript button. You can click on that button and hit show subtitles, and you'll be able to see subtitles throughout the course of today's meeting. Additionally, we have an American Sign Language interpreter with us who will be interpreting our meeting, which is very exciting. So with that, I'm going to do an official call to order. We have a full quorum of our committee, and we will proceed from there to the safety briefing. And I will turn that over to Bonnie Sherman.
Good morning, everyone. In January, we discussed crash data for the first 11 months of 2020. Now that we have a full year of crash data for 2020, we did end the year with an overall increase in bicyclist and pedestrian fatalities in Texas last year. 10 more bicyclists and 56 more pedestrians lost their lives on Texas roadways in 2020. At the same time, we had substantial declines in other injury crashes that involved bicyclists and pedestrians, which does leave something for us to be optimistic about. In fact, we had over 1,000 fewer pedestrians and almost 400 fewer bicyclists injured in traffic crashes in 2020. So understanding the underlying factors of these trends could make a difference. You can see on the slide that aside from some of the anomalies in the first parts of the pandemic, the crash patterns in 2020 were actually pretty similar to 2019. And while a lot of people are still working from home and social distancing, May is still Bike Month, and warmer weather will bring more people out on the street. So look out for Kids on the Road on May 5th, which is Bike to School Day. Bike to Work Week is May 17th through 23rd. And Bike to Work Day this year is on Friday, May 21st. Thank you. Carla.
All right, thank you, Bonnie. All right, next we'll have the approval of our minutes from the January 15th BAC meeting. And this is an action item. Hopefully you've had a chance to review the meeting minutes. They were in your packet. Does anyone have any changes or corrections to this? All right,
Sorry.
Oh, Ava, go ahead.
No, I was saying I had a chance to review the minutes and I didn't see any corrections that were needed.
Okay, great. Hearing none, I am asking for a motion to approve.
Motion
to approve.
All right, we're gonna give the motion to Bobby and the second to Ava. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say likewise. All right, the ayes have it. So our next item is a report from Txdot's Public Transportation Division Director regarding statewide bicycle and pedestrian matters. Eric Gleason, we'll turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the new Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, first official meeting. I have a number of items to go through this morning. The first thing I wanted to highlight, I believe everyone has a copy of this, but our chief engineer released some interim bicycle accommodation design guidance on April 2nd. And I know that internally in the department, we forever have referred to the John Barton memo, which was, seems like sometime around the turn of the century, but it was actually 2000, I want to say 13, maybe in that time frame. But this is a dramatic improvement over that document. And I'm hoping that if you've had a chance to look through that, that you will see the direct impact that the work you've been doing as a committee over the past 18 months is having on Txdot efforts to better incorporate bikeway design considerations into both the project planning and design effort. So we read that, and it really represents a significant step forward. So we're very glad to see that and hope that you are too. So today we'll talk about the next major focus point for the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. That's agenda item 4. One thing to think about is the concept of maybe a quick turnaround item. Now the department does have a safety task force. That is it's a commission task force. Commissioner Ryan currently heads it. And one of the areas they are looking for assistance on is promoting the adoption of the Vision Zero policies or implementing Vision Zero policies in local communities. And so there's an interest in perhaps tapping into some of the experience you all have in your local communities on this. And so that's something to consider when we get to that item on the agenda. Quick update on our transportation alternatives, construction of bicycle and pedestrian facility program. We began this journey with a 2015 set of projects, and all of those projects have been let for construction, with 2/3 of them, almost 2/3 of them being complete. We had another round of projects selected in 2017, and 41 out of 44 of those projects have been authorized for construction, and 7 of those are complete. 2019, the most recent call for projects, that was a combination of transportation alternative and safe routes to school program projects. 73% or 22 of those projects have an executed advanced funding agreement, and the other 27%, or 8 of them, have an advanced funding agreement, which is near execution. So you get a sense, looking at the 2015, 17, and 19 progress descriptions, you get a sense of how these projects proceed from being an idea on paper that is funded to actually getting construction. It does take some time, but we're seeing steady progress. And then also coming from that 2019 effort, you may recall that as a part of that project review and selection effort, the department did identify a list of projects. We called it a conditional project list. We did identify a group of projects that once additional funding became available, that they scored highly enough in our review of them that we wanted to move ahead with commission consideration of those projects for funding. So we do have a minute order scheduled for commission consideration later this month to move 16 projects from that 2019 effort for funding. 3 of those are non-urban area projects totaling about $2.5 million, and 13 of those are small urban area projects totaling just over $23 million. Finally, the current call for projects, we currently have one, as you know, that's out there. We've, we do a 2-step process with these calls. We first ask project sponsors with ideas for projects to submit a preliminary application. And we use that preliminary application to screen for some basic eligibility considerations. Is it a kind of project that can be funded from the program? Is it located in an area of the state that we provide funding for? And then finally, is the entity proposing the project, are they an eligible project sponsor? So I think we got a total of 190 project proposals sent in. 187 of those were determined to be eligible, looking at the criteria that I just mentioned. And in total, asking for about $234 million in estimated project costs. We've got, so of those 187, 84 of those are non-urban. And if you recall, non-urban are those communities with less than 5,000 in population. And then 103 are small urban, which is 5,000 to 200,000. And with about $75 million associated with rural area projects, excuse me, and 159 million represented with small urban projects. So the district is also looking at these preliminary applications in conjunction with project sponsors. And we will be letting folks know soon that they are eligible to proceed to step 2, which is to submit a detailed application. And we'll begin that next week. So, and those detailed applications, which are the applications we actually conduct the scoring on, are due on June 14th. So that is proceeding on schedule, and we're targeting a fall commission consideration of recommended funding for this effort. And then finally, I want to mention that we do have some upcoming vacancies every year in August. We have anywhere from 3 to 4 of the 11-member committee terms do expire. And so we have, I believe we have 3 coming up this August. And we will shortly be sending something out toward the end of this month, looking for potential candidates to fill those vacancies. And looking for folks to let us know somewhere between April 26th and May 14th that they are interested. One of the things to keep in mind this time around is we do have some additional language in the administrative code that was added in conjunction with expanding the scope of the committee to include pedestrians, is that the committee membership will reflect a diverse mix of bicycle and pedestrian stakeholders, including stakeholders representing the interests of persons with disabilities and people knowledgeable about micromobility issues. So at least one of these 3 openings will need to respond to that new language. And the members, just for everyone's information, the members whose terms are expiring in August, Bobby Gonzalez, Trent Brookshire, and Frank Rotnowski. So those 3 individuals. And of course, any one of you all that I just mentioned can let us know whether you are interested in being considered for continuing to serve on the committee. So with that, that completes my report, and I will turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Eric. Does anyone have any questions for Eric? All right, it was a very thorough job. All right, well, hearing no questions, we'll move on to item 5, which will be presented by Bonnie Sherman. This will be a discussion on Bikeway design effort interim guiding principles for Bikeway conflict points, and this is an action item.
Thank you all for being here today. We are excited to give y'all an update on the Bikeway design effort, where we are today. Next slide. A quick overview of what we'll talk about today. I will go over the guiding principles for Bikeway conflict points and intersections. After a brief overview of the process and where we are, including the schedule, and then we will open it up for discussion and request action to endorse these interim guiding principles. Next slide. So this is a reminder of where we are today. As you recall, we have adopted 2 interim topical guiding principles for bikeway selection and linear bikeway design. Those elements have been incorporated to some extent into the new bikeway accommodation guidance. So we encourage you to look at that. And the remaining work that we do can also be incorporated into the roadway design manual as it is updated to incorporate the new bikeway design guidance as an aside. Today, we are focused on guiding principles for intersections and conflict points. And we are looking for your endorsement of the guiding principles for those areas. In July, we will come back with guiding principles for maintenance topics. And we will also review all of the previous guiding principles and ask you to endorse the entire set at that point. Next slide. Just a quick look at the schedule. Today, April 9th, approval of the guiding principles for conflict points. We have 3 working group meetings planned between now and the end of June to focus on maintenance guiding principles. And then we plan to come back in July, on July 16th at our next Bpac meeting for final approval. Next slide. So this is an overview of the topical areas that we have addressed. In intersections and conflict points, we were focused on looking at protected intersections, bicycle signals, signage, and pavement markings for safer intersections, driveways and railroad crossings, transit connectivity, and pavement markings and driveway conflict points. Next slide. All right. So the first, I believe there are 13 total guiding principles, or maybe 11. But the first 10 or so are focused on signal signage and pavement markings. And so we start here with the first 2, which are focused on intersection pavement markings. The first one is where bicycle lanes meet intersections, Txdot should consider the application of bicycle lane extensions or dashed pavement markings through the intersection to identify where bicyclists are expected to operate and to recognize potentially unexpected conflict points, especially where buffered or separated bike lanes are present. Where right turn lanes cross over bike lanes, dashed pavement markings should be applied to indicate a merge condition. So this is in reference to dashed pavement markings through the intersection as indicated on the figure on the right and circled in red. The second guiding principle is where shared use paths meet signalized intersections, Txdot should consider applying separate pavement markings to identify crosswalks for pedestrians and bicycle lane extensions for bicycles. Shared use paths should be signed at major conflict points to clearly communicate pedestrian and bicyclist priority. And this one is demonstrated in figure 2 below, where there are separate green colored pavement markings in the example for the bicycle crossing and I believe it's a continental crosswalk for the pedestrians. That example there is for a dedicated shared use path intersection, but if there were a road adjacent, a roadway crossing at the same place, there would be a roadway intersection as well. Carla is asking if we should ask questions or wait to the end, and I will say feel free to jump in as we go through these if you have questions about any of the specific guiding principles, or if there is something that any of the working group members would like to share about the guiding principles as we go, feel free to interrupt.
And Bonnie, I do have a quick question. For recommendations such as this, if a city has a planned bike lane but is not currently existing, would these apply if it's on a plan, or is this only to accommodate existing bike lanes?
So I would suggest that this be, that these dashed intersection markings be used where there are bike lanes crossing. When those bike lanes are added in the future, then those intersection markings could be applied at that time.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next slide. All right, so the next few are focused on green pavement markings. Number 3, future research on green pavement markings should focus on durability, skid resistance, and application technologies, and should include recommendations for Txdot standard specifications for green pavement application types and procedures. Number 4, based on research, Txdot should use green pavement markings to increase bicyclist conspicuity and predictability, especially where separated bikeways meet signalized intersections, slip lanes, exit ramps, and other conflict points where safety issues are identified. And number 5, until the Texas Manual for Uniform Traffic Control Devices is updated to include green pavement markings, Txdot should consider partnering with local governments to install green pavement markings at intersections with low-stress bikeways, for example, shared use paths or separated bike lanes, or where bicycle safety issues are documented. Maintenance of bicycle pavement markings should be incorporated into Txdot's standard municipal maintenance agreements. And the exhibit on the right has an example of the green pavement markings across an intersection. Any questions on this one? All right, moving on to the next slide.
Sorry, Bonnie, quick question. This is Eva.
Yes.
So it says until TMUTCD is updated. Are there any plans for that to be updated that we're aware of?
The Texas Manual for the TMUTCD, or the federal MUTCD, is actually in the process of being updated now. It is out for public review and comment, and is anticipated to be approved over the next year or two. Then Txdot will develop its state MUTCD, using that federal MUTCD as the basis. And then that will be issued probably 1 or 2 years after the MUTCD is updated. So, that process is in the work. It's just a lengthy one.
It's good to know. As long as we're aware, we're looking at about 2 to 4 years.
Yes.
But thank you. That was my question. Appreciate it.
Okay. I also want to mention that I've seen a few chats pop up, and we are not monitoring the chat through this meeting, this quarterly meeting. Public comments can be submitted later by email, and Carla will mention that later during the public comment section. All right, so item 6, where separated bikeways conflict with motor vehicle phasing and turning movements at signalized intersections, Txdot should consider the application of bicycle signal faces and dashed intersection crossing markings. Number 7, on shared roadways that provide key bicycle route connections or where safety concerns are documented, it is recommended that Txdot use bicycle may use full lane sign as the standard bicycle regulatory sign instead of share the road. Number 8, roadway design engineers should consider sight lines of all users. Landscaping, signage, and parked cars can hinder visibility for motorists, bicyclists, and pedestrians. And number 9, mid-block crossing signals such as pedestrian hybrid beacons and rectangular rapid flashing beacons should provide feedback after the actuator button is pressed and should be timed to balance pedestrian priority with arterial signal timing. PHBs and RRSBs should be applied where appropriate in accordance with Txdot's Traffic Safety Division memo. Does anyone have any questions about items 6 through 9?
I support it. I like the bicycles may use full lane sign over share the road. So thank you to the working group members.
And Eva, the share the road sign is proposed to be removed from the MUTCD in the next round. So
Thank you. Good to know. Appreciate that update.
next slide. Number 10, where transit and bikeway facilities exist within roadway right-of-way, roadway designers should consider transit stop designs that separate and protect bicyclists from transit ingress and egress, such as an island bus stop, which moves bikeway facilities behind a transit stop. The example is shown in the exhibit at the bottom of the page there that shows a bike lane going behind the bus stop. And number 11, where bicycle lanes meet railroads at angles other than 90 degrees, on-street bikeways should be transitioned to off-road shared use paths, wrapping behind rail crossing arms, allowing bicyclists to cross as close to a 90-degree angle as possible. For example, a jug handle design, similar to Txdot standard RCD 116, which is the pedestrian standard. Maintenance of off-street railroad crossings should be included in the municipal maintenance agreements where applicable. The exhibit on the right, at the bottom, there are a couple of photos. One shows a bicycle wheel kind of slipping into the groove next to the rail on a railroad track, indicating the concern that is attempted to be addressed by this recommendation. The photo on the right, at the bottom right corner, is an example of a transition from an on-street bike lane to a shared use path facility. And then the diagram at the top on the right is a skewed railroad crossing. So you can see the on-street bike lane transitions onto a shared use path or a off-street bicycle facility, and then goes up and crosses the railroad at a 90-degree angle to eliminate the hazard shown below. Any questions about these? All right, next slide. So this slide and the next slide just list all of the guiding principles for intersections and bikeway conflict points. It's a lot of words, but does anyone else have any questions, or do any of our working group members want to say anything about these guiding principles? So with that, let's see, next slide. Next slide. So at this time, we would like the committee to take action on supporting the guiding principles for bikeway conflict points. Carla?
All right, thanks, Bonnie. So the action before us is to adopt the intersection and conflict points design topic recommendations to be incorporated into the Bikeway design guiding principles. That was a mouthful, but I wrote it down. All right, so with that in mind and having reviewed these and we had an opportunity for questions, can I have a motion to approve?
This is Chelsea. I move to approve.
All right.
I second that.
Chelsea, and we've got a second from
Bobby.
Bobby. All in favor, please unmute and say aye.
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 Hearing a chorus of yeses. Any opposed? All right, it passes unanimously. Thank you, Bobby. Bonnie, this is exciting.
Yes, it is. Next slide. This is the last slide. It's just an overview of our schedule and a reminder that we will be back with all of the final guiding principles in July for the BAC adoption, or the Bpac adoption, including new guiding principles on maintenance topics. So thank you all very much. And congratulations on all of the hard work to get us to this point.
Yes, thank you to all the committee members and to Bonnie and Noah and Carl for all your work on this. I know there's extra meetings involved talking about these topics and reviewing best practices, so it's very much appreciated. All right, we'll move on to item number 6. Carl is going to present for us a discussion on the next Bpac efforts. So this is exciting. This is where the committee is headed, new activities, priorities, and so hopefully we've got some good discussion coming. Carl?
Good morning. Hopefully y'all can see me. And it looks like my presentation's coming right along. All right, so this is our second in a series of 3 presentations in which we are presenting, getting ready for what we want to do next. As a Bpac, you guys have been working on the Bikeway design effort for couple of years. It's been a while. And so we go ahead and next slide. What we want to do is report back on some of the brainstorming that we heard from you guys last time. And then we also want to have an opportunity to do an interactive polling exercise where we can kind of generate a little more thought and discussion about what may or may not be your most important items within those topics, within those categories of brainstorming ideas that you came up with. Next slide. First off, we wanted to again remind folks and get everyone on the same page of what our purpose and duties are. This is always relevant when you want to do another big effort. You know, I'll remind you, last time we did this, we cobbled together a whole bunch of ideas into the Bikeway design effort, which ended up being a multi-year exercise. So as we approach this, we want to make sure that we are on the same page. So I'll go ahead and read the quote that's in the middle there. By involving representatives of the public, including bicyclists, pedestrians, and other interested parties, the department helps ensure effective communication with the bicycle and pedestrian communities, and that the bicyclists and pedestrians' perspectives will be considered in the development of departmental policies affecting bicycle use, pedestrian activity, and including the design, construction, and maintenance of highways. So it's good to get everyone on the same page there. And then briefly, the duties that you'll see in the yellow box there, you know, specifically, you are called out to provide recommendations related to our transportation alternatives call for projects, which is the next presentation. The bicycle tourism trails is specifically called out in the TAC. And now we also have reviewing and considering personal mobility and micro-mobility devices. And anything else falls under that last bullet, which is reviewing and making recommendations of mutual concern between the department and bicycle and pedestrian communities. Next slide. So before we talk about all the good ideas you guys have, I just wanted to again lay down the foundation of why are we doing this? Well, one, because we're kind of a new committee now. We now have a new task, which is to consider pedestrians as well. Also, the last strategic development report was completed in 2015, and I think Txdot and the Bpac have done a good job of progressing a lot of those activities in the last 6 years. So, you know, progress has been made. Maybe it's time for us to refocus. The bicycle design effort is ending in July, and we'll have some new Bpac members starting in October. So for all of those reasons, now is a good time to be talking about this. So the objective is we want to update the SDR, and then specifically we want to kind of think about if there's another parallel or quick turnaround effort that can occur before we take that on in earnest. And then, as you heard earlier from Eric Gleason, there is an item of commission interest that we want to talk about, and I'll talk about that in a few slides. Next. So we heard a lot from y'all. We asked for brainstorm ideas. I compiled them all. It was over 5,000 words. We heard from 9 of the 11 members, 8 pages of text. How do you summarize all of that? Poorly. But here's a word cloud that kind of shows a lot of the big ideas and themes that came from your brainstorming. You'll see bicycle a lot, but you won't see pedestrian a lot. So that's something we do need to think about as we continue to advance our new considerations in our scope. So great ideas. I want to thank you guys a lot for that. Next slide. I apologize that the text keeps populating so small, but we went ahead and grouped the ideas into 8 categories, and they are, I'll just point out the ones that received the most attention from the group. It was infrastructure design, so that's bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure design, education and training. Those are the 2 biggest, and then implementation of infrastructure and policy improvements. So I think the committee is really on board with kind of a similar set of ideas as was presented in the SDR previously. So next slide. So some of the ideas that were presented will do a great service to us as we start to think about what the next SDR will include in it. So here I won't read these, but there was some about what our approach should be, how we should focus, and then also some other ideas about how we should generate a more expansive set of ideas, either from local or regional committees or from existing networks that the Bpac members are related to. Next slide. Here we get to the meat of what folks thought were good things to consider next for our next big effort. One big category was education and training, whether this be specifically for users, bicyclist education for operation, or for practitioners of the infrastructure, whether that be engineers, Txdot, and local governments. And how we go about educating folks. How do we get that word out? Next slide. Another big category was about infrastructure design. We have a lot of folks who like the idea of getting in the weeds, of talking about specific standards, creating specific guidance for types of infrastructure, whether that be chip seal or island refuges, rumble strips, shared use paths on frontage roads. Folks are specifically thinking about how we can create a standard set of principles and guidance for across the state. Next slide. And then there were other comments that were about implementation. So we've done 2 years of talking about process and procedures and guidance here at Txdot, some folks suggested that it's a great opportunity now for us to focus on how do we get that stuff implemented thoroughly. So whether that is additional recommendations on coordination items between local and Txdot, or if that's diving into funding mechanisms to understand how the infrastructure can go from an idea or a process into all of Txdot's projects across the state. And then also a comment about the tourism trail study. How do we think about branding or marketing or really creating inertia behind those ideas to start getting those segments built around the state? The next group of categories was policy improvements. So, and here we have things about complete streets. How do we go about supporting from a policy level, all of the things that we've proposed in guiding principles, safe crossing policies, better incorporating into ADA transition plans into projects, and things like that. Next slide. Also, there was an interest in having an analysis point of view from the statewide level, whether that be just an analytical approach to policy development, starting with a statewide system look at reductions in bike ped fatalities, or if that's looking at hotspots, reviewing crash data. Some of these things have been done in smaller segments or maybe specific asks throughout the years, but perhaps this needs to be put into the SDR in a systematic way. Next slide. So lastly, we get to a set of ideas that we categorized as more quick turnaround. As I mentioned before, we engaged in a very long effort with the Bikeway design effort. So, but there's some ideas that were generated that might be shorter in scope, which we're talking less than 6 months. And so some of those that we saw in the brainstorm list were reporting on bicycle and pedestrian research projects. Part of the issue here is that there's not a strong understanding of what one hand is doing and the other one is over here doing other things. So Txdot has a really great research program. Not only Txdot, but other entities around the state are doing research on bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure and safety policies. What does that mean and who's doing what? And maybe we need to have a good handle on that before we move forward. Secondly, the coronavirus has really shaken all of us up, and it's made a big impact in the transportation world. So perhaps we need to look at a deep dive on the consequences and the results of the coronavirus pandemic, both historically and current. So that's another idea. Next would be, we just need to get a better understanding of what we've done. Perhaps just a comprehensive set of presentations on what has been accomplished since the SDR was completed in 2015. One of the, I think as far as committee members go, we have so many members who weren't around when that was written. And so it's an opportunity for us to see the progress that's been made, and that would be impactful into how we move forward. Next would be creating a repository of education campaigns that are completed around the state. Again, this is understanding what maybe there's more accomplished than we previously thought. The next one, update on an interactive bikeway map. I actually might ask if anyone in the committee has specifics on what this meant. I was thinking about it while we're making this presentation, and there was an effort underway previously to create from Txdot an interactive bikeway map that showed all the bicycle routes in Texas, or infrastructure. Is that what that member meant? If anyone wants to speak up.
Yeah, this is Clint. I think that was one of mine, and I pulled mostly from existing SDR and try to think about, because I think there were some really great ideas in there. And I think in my mind, it was just meant to be kind of a place where we could go and see the facilities. And part of the purpose of that was when I was working at the MPO down here, a lot of our lower capacity local governments really wanted to have access to bikeway maps, but just did not have, like, they may not have even had a planner on staff or GIS capacity in that way. And just being able to see, maybe take a screenshot of something on the Txdot statewide planning map would have been helpful to them. To me, it was kind of a capacity building for some of our smaller communities ideas. I don't know if it is the best use of time for this. I know it can be really difficult to compile all of that information, even though Txdot has more resources, that doesn't mean, like I said, that doesn't mean that's the best use of time, but that was the idea.
Sure. Yeah. I believe prior to you joining, since that wasn't an element that was in the SDR in 2015, Txdot's public transportation division started down that road. And we were working on a procurement to get a vendor to start making that for us. And now Txdot's IT has kind of put the hold on that for a while. So that's why nothing has happened on that. But, this is a great example of perhaps needing to summarize the work and the efforts that have been accomplished and what hasn't been accomplished as a result of the SDR in 2015. So thank you. And the last bullet here is visualize bikeway design effort results. I will say, Eric gave a brief top discussion in his director's report this morning about bikeway accommodation guidance that came out through the chief engineer of Txdot. We are planning to have a speaker from Txdot design division discuss in July's meeting. And maybe I'm saying this too early for for Bonnie, but anyway, in July's meeting to talk about the bikeway design effort and how it rolled in to that bikeway accommodation guidance that was just released last week, which is great. All right, and then the next item here, so we have a commissioner who works with a safety task force, as Eric mentioned, and the request specifically is that that commissioner is interested in encouraging local jurisdictions around the state to adopt Vision Zero policies. You may remember at Txdot, from a statewide perspective, the commission has adopted a road to zero goal, and that would be by 2050 to have zero crash-related deaths on Texas highways. So that is something to think about, but in a more specific sense, we noted that several of the state's Vision Zero communities happen to be represented on this committee, specifically Laredo, Austin, and Houston, all have adopted Vision Zero policies locally. So it was suggested that perhaps another activity could be documenting best practices from our members in those areas or other cities around the states to better inform a promotional campaign about Vision Zero policies at the local level. So that's what that bullet's about. Does anyone have any questions about that bullet before I move on?
This is Frank.
I do have a question about that. Oh, sorry, Frank, you can go.
That's okay. Yeah, Laredo's on there. I think we were the second in the state, or maybe the third. I guess my question, and that's a great idea, and it's obviously very rooted in education for the community, and it really is perfect for the now Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee, since it's everybody's involved in this. I guess my question is, do we know offhand now how many cities have adopted Vision Zero in Texas? Do we know that at all?
No, I don't know it off the top of my head.
Okay.
I'm sure we could get back to y'all with that information.
Because it is growing in this country. And hopefully, yeah, this is a great I think this is a great opportunity to put this out there.
Carl, my only comment would be Vision Zero is not in our region housed in bicycle and pedestrian planning. It starts with our auto safety group, and the bike and ped is a component of it. So kind of thinking through that and where most jurisdictions and organizations are going to push for the policy of that, I think we need to kind of noodle through a little bit. Maybe it's a support piece that we could develop that goes with that, or maybe I don't know how those two would merge, because I don't, my safety lady, I don't want to like leap over her, but I want to give her tools and resources to support what she's trying to do to get more of our cities to adopt a Vision Zero. Fort Worth and Dallas did last year, I believe. So we have 2 of our 280 cities. There's lots of room to grow there. So I know that it's coming through y'all's safety committee as well at the state, is what Eric mentioned. So how we partner with those groups at the state level, at the regions, and at the cities, I think is maybe worth some more conversation in the future. But I think it's a great goal.
So I think, Carla, this is Eric. I think the idea, we were aware that some members of the committee lived in communities or worked in communities that had them. I don't think it was necessarily a thought that it would be structured through the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee as much as just taking advantage. And maybe it's as straightforward as, you making a connection for us across, your area as to who that person is. And I think we just recognized we were familiar enough with those communities, recognize we had members on the committee from there, and it just might be a way in for us to understand, the conversation that took place that led up to adopting Vision Zero.
I can tell you in a smaller city like Laredo, by getting it adopted, it was run, locally through our traffic department, but just to have the traffic department, the health department, police and fire, the agencies that come together within the city in a room together, that never happened before in Laredo. And it was obviously, it really, everybody understood their part in it. And I would say for smaller cities, obviously the big cities have a lot more going for it. It became a very useful tool and by adopting it.
Great. Any other members want to talk about that?
Sorry, Carl. This is Clint. This is slightly related, maybe. I just know in a previous meeting of the work group, we had mentioned, or maybe the full group, we had mentioned also discussing that neighborhood street design concept. It's not the same thing as documenting best practices, but I know a lot of folks showed interest in that. Maybe not something that goes in the strategic direction report, but just something that we could do as a committee.
Okay, so perhaps just making sure that we don't lose track of that idea, neighborhood street design as another element. And are you suggesting it would be something that could be a quick turnaround idea, or something that would be good for the SDR?
I think it was kind of just an educational, one of us bringing it up during or presenting a few slides during a meeting. So okay. I don't know if it goes here, sorry.
Okay, well, maybe we'll couch it as a potential future presentation to the Bpac, but maybe not related to this effort.
Great, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay, sounds good. Cool, and then the last elements on this slide are just some ideas that we wanted to make sure folks saw, that we heard your ideas, but I think they're outside of the scope of the committee, which is changing laws or policy to make bicyclists vulnerable users, to make the Bpac reviewers of specific standards and specifications, and have the Bpac support harsher penalties for drivers. Okay, So right now I have sent out to the panelists in the chat a code. Got a little messed up there, but Karen, if you could let me share my screen. Which screen do you guys see?
It's
Oh.
not the mentee.
Like a
Okay.
I see modern art. I'm not sure what I'm.
It
Yeah,
says
great
April
sort of-
2021 Bpac.
Great.
There you go.
How about now?
Looks
There we
good.
go.
Thank you, Carl.
Yes.
Even better. All right. So we're going to do an interactive polling exercise. And it looks like some folks have done a good job of being on the ball, but we sent out the access code and we also have the question here on the screen. What I'd like folks to do is go ahead and answer the question, what are the most important activities for Txdot's bicycle and pedestrian program over the next 2 years? And of course, we're asking this because you all didn't get to see all of the brainstorm comments that came in. And we want to make sure that y'all can see what your fellow members are thinking.
Carl, are we typing something in? I'm confused.
Yes, if you could go to menti.com and then there's a code that I put in the chat. You might have to scroll up a little bit. I also sent it in the invite to this meeting for the panelists. And you guys are going to fill in some words in a blank and hit submit.
You lost me with the .com. Okay.
Nice. Well, we have 7, looks like 7 responses so far. So we'll let it go on for a few more seconds. But what I'm seeing from folks is a range of activities that we think are most important. Everything from promoting the bicycle tourism trails to systematic implementation. I still see things about design. I think about funding, about best practices, safeties, big and bold. So, all right. Thank you guys so much. With that, I'm gonna, oh, you're still getting some. I will go ahead and move to our next question. We have 2 more questions, and these are a little more challenging for y'all. So, how would you rank these categories in importance? These are the categories that I showed in the presentation. They're kind of broad, but they represent the ideas from the committee, and you can, in your view, put a scale of 1 to 10 on each of the ideas, or the categories, pardon me. So if you think the education and training category is the most important, that might be 10. If you think safe systems analysis is right behind it, it might be 8. All right, and now we'll get to see the results from the committee members on the categories that they think are the most important. And you'll see here, we get to see the range of responses. The higher the peak, that means the more responses. So, and I can even hover over here and show you guys how many. So we can do that too. So it looks like safe systems analysis is pretty consistently high. We've got 7 responses so far. we have 9 members here today. I think we have maybe 10 because it's just Rick that's not here. Great. So I personally find this a very interesting way to look at this. It's interesting to me as well because during the last meeting, we had a lot of discussion about education and training. However, today's category rankings, as folks are saying, that's maybe not as important as some of the other elements that we've seen. And if there's back members that want to talk while I'm doing this, we don't have to be, you know, quiet. We can have a discussion about these results as we see them.
I guess I'll chime in that for education and training, when I see like design and implementation, I feel like they go hand in hand, right? In order to implement best practices, we need to educate and train. When we're reviewing safety and talking about policy, there's also an education and training component. So I think, yeah, moving forward, whatever we end up doing, that education and training is automatically a part of that work.
Totally. And if we look back at our SDR in 2015, we'll definitely find that all of these were included. I would imagine, you know, they won't be left off, but certainly it helps us to understand kind of where these things are held in the Bpac members' minds. Great. Well, if there's nothing else, I'll move on to our last polling question, which we talked about several quick turnaround ideas, and they're all listed here. So you'll see on your view, you have an opportunity to pick one of them. So this will help us, if everyone responds, to hopefully get an idea of which one of these is the most important. So I'll go ahead and read them. Best practices for adopting Vision Zero. Oh, that was the commissioner's suggestion. Visualizing the results, the impacts of the bikeway design effort, reporting on research projects, statewide deep dive into coronavirus pandemic, summarizing the work accomplishments during the SDR, repository of education campaigns, or an updating an interactive bikeway map. So we've got 4 respondents so far. All right, some folks think that our biggest category so far is reporting back on Txdot funded research projects. Interesting.
This is a cool one, Carl. I like how this one shows up.
Yeah, I think it would be, it's one of those with like a lot of respondents, you'd get even more fine-grained data. I'm liking that it's not just an even split.
Number 2 is pretty even.
Yeah, you're right about that. Great. Oh, we have eight respondents, so that's pretty great. Awesome. Well, folks, I mean, I hope this was a little, you know, educational for you. It was educational for us. It helps us to understand where everyone stands. Does anyone want to report or talk about why they voted the way they did?
I guess I'll just chime in. I did select report on the research because I think it's good to get an understanding of where the research currently is and get an update on that before we move to the next action item and what you know, our ideas are. So to kind of reframe, you know, our thoughts and our approach just by learning first and then going forward.
Certainly. Thanks.
Yeah, as a region that just had a bike ped research project, it really informed our regional pedestrian safety plan, and it was a huge amount of data and a big lift from the research team that Txdot hired. We had submitted a research project from our bike ped program, and then we're selected, and it came out of UTEP. It was a really cool project, and we're like, there's got to be more of these. And then you find out there's lots of these, just how to access them, look at those previous examples and what people were doing. I think there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And I think the research stuff really falls hand in hand with the education campaigns. I think Txdot has been funding and supporting education campaigns for years. And so there's got to be a suppository of those somewhere, or repository of those. And I think making those available to people, because I feel like the industry, people change and move around so much, it becomes a revolving door of let's start again. And there's already great ideas out there. So I think both of those hopefully would be pretty simple tasks with Txdot at the helm.
Yes, that things have in this industry have been changing dramatically in the last 10 years, and the research has attempted to keep up pace, and so it's happened almost as quickly. Well, with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to let Karen go ahead and share the presentation again. And I will finish up. Okay, so this is kind of just our next steps. As we mentioned in July, we're going to be finishing up the Bikeway design effort. And then in October, not only are we welcoming new Bpac members, but we'll be starting something. So we will either be beginning our next quick turnaround activity and or we'll be starting the update of the SDR. We will have another check-in, another presentation during the July meeting, a short one, and we'll talk about this a little more. And just we'll keep in touch over email to talk about any next steps that y'all can help us with before then. And with that, I think, next slide, I think I'm done, unless there's other questions and comments.
All right, thanks, Carl. Appreciate it.
Super.
So Carla, this is Eric. Before we leave this topic, I think just a comment. I think the committee has been very successful in the past when it chooses to focus on a relatively small number or even one activity. It was the tourism trails. Well, first there was the strategic direction report in 2015. Never had one of those before. Total focus of the committee at the time to produce that. Then there was the tourism trails study, total focus on that. Then the design effort, which has been hugely successful, I believe anyways. Again, a total focus. So I think the lesson we're learning is, there's so much to be done that it's difficult sometimes to choose, but the committee has proven to be very effective when it does focus. And so I think following the July discussion and hopefully adoption around the design, the Bikeway design standards and principles, when we do move forward, that we can kind of focus, because I do think that's where the success has come.
I think that's a great point, Eric. And early on in Carl's presentation, he talked about updating the document, removing some things that have been completed, adding some of these new elements, especially from the pedestrian realm, and getting that incorporated into the document. I think all of those things will be important, and maybe it didn't rise to the top, but the report out of what we've done, I think, is really important, and not just for the new members on the board, but maybe for the commission and maybe for the general public, so that they know about all the documents and the tools and resources that have come out, kind of a state of the region, if you will, of where we've been over the last 5 years and then where we're headed for the next 5 years. I'm with a long range planning organization, so I like having the vision of where we're going and celebrating everything that's been accomplished. So I think everybody's
okay.
This may be a little late question to ask, but when we say quick turnaround idea, what is quick turnaround? Is that the focus of SDR? Was that quick turnaround activity, like the study? Because I think maybe I misunderstood what quick turnaround activity is and sort of what our focus could be. But I wouldn't have considered the Bikeway design effort to be a quick turnaround activity. So yeah, exactly.
No, indeed. And I think the intent was something less than 6 months.
Okay, well then in that case, I think we're good.
Yeah,
yes,
I tend to think of quick turnaround in terms of committee meetings. And, maybe 2 committee meetings where the first one you talk about it, the second one you see the results and do something with it.
Good clarification.
That's helpful.
If you were thinking it, other people were thinking it too. So thank you for asking.
I've got a late question comment to you. This is Mike.
Yeah.
My pick was the interactive map, but it looked like one other person did as well. And I wasn't necessarily thinking of that in terms of what Eric was saying, like a deep dive, deep focus type of item. But I think maybe for us who are a bit newer to the committee, like even just a quick item presentation of like where we're at with that and the necessity for putting it on hold currently would be helpful.
Okay, that's a good point, Mike. Maybe we can bring that back to a future meeting. And for everyone, Bonnie's put in the chat what's currently available on Txdot's website. I had also added a comment. It's my understanding, and Bonnie can correct me if I'm wrong, that Txdot Interactive Map is based on maps that we're all developing. So they are not hiring teams of GIS members to go and map out routes within the state, but they take city maps, regional maps, and then they create sort of a network statewide that shows what's existing or what's already been developed. And I think it would be more of that, is my understanding. Bonnie, would that be, am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes. We had at one point begun an effort to roll up the local maps into a centralized GIS database. That effort was put on hold due to a whole data reorganization at Txdot. So that effort, which actually was pretty expansive, and it was a big project. So I'm not sure that it would be a quick turnaround. So it has been put on hold, and we don't have a current effort on that at the moment. But what I did put on in the chat for everyone is what we do have for bikeway maps that have been posted by local entities across the state. And we're trying to compile as many of those as we can find. So we would appreciate contributions to that. And if the committee does want to advance that, a statewide interface that collects all of the map GIS for bikeways and develops a framework that all entities can put their GIS data into and be consistent with, that would be an effort that that we would have to explore at that time.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. I think maybe a couple of these that rose to the top in today's exercise, maybe we can bring back to the next meeting and narrow the world even more and have more detailed discussions about the top 5 or whatever those are, and prioritize some of those, or throw some out or add 1 or 2 more that maybe as people thought about it, they had some other ideas. The bike map is hard. I've had a full-time person doing it for 15 years in my region, and it's not all correct. I mean, it's thousands of miles. So that's a big ask, and it's a big take, and it's probably only as good as your region and your cities are doing. So I think there's a lot of nuances on that we could talk through and kind of understand what people need as a tool and what they're hoping to achieve and what Txdot's capabilities are. Definitely more to talk about there. But this is great, guys. There's it's exciting to think about all the ideas and all of the new projects coming up and tools and resources that we can develop that'll help all of our parts of the state of Texas. So love the brainstorming. Okay, and then our final information item is from Noah Heath. He's going to talk to us about an update on Txdot's 2021 Transportation Alternative Set Aside, or TA, Call for Projects Evaluation Criteria. Noah, we will turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. We presented our Txdot 2021 Transportation Alternative Program Call for Projects process at the last BAC meeting. And everyone was able to provide feedback through a survey. And so this presentation will be going over those results and also giving an update on where we are with the call for projects. Next slide. So the agenda, like I said, we'll go over the call for projects and where we are. We'll talk about the back action that was taken at the last meeting and the criteria category weights input that we received, and then show the results that we will be providing project sponsors in the detailed application instructions. Next slide. So as you may remember from our last presentation, our call for projects opened January 15th. We have a two-step process. Step one is the preliminary application, which the deadline was March 1st, and we pushed that out a week due to the winter storm. A lot of the project sponsors lost a week of productivity there, so we allowed them to submit their applications by March 8th. We're still going to meet our April 12th deadline of getting back with the project sponsors to let them know if they are eligible to move on to step two, which is the detailed application. That detailed application is due June 14th. And then we have the summer to review, score, and rank those projects, and then create a list to be recommended to commission for award by October, and then also create a conditional project list, which will also be released in October. Next slide. So one of the aspects that we received feedback from the back on was the criteria we are using for the call for projects, or the weights for the criteria categories. We developed this evaluation criteria in stages. We started with our 2019 criteria, Txdot's mission, vision, and goals. And then we also identified best practices at state DOTs and NPOs. We took all of this information and presented it at a workshop with district coordinators for some of our Txdot districts, and then some smaller NPOs, and identified any additional criteria and measures, and then also went through several weighting exercises to determine weights for each of the criteria and criteria categories. We are also working and have created a tool that will help us evaluate these projects by taking available data provided in the detailed applications, and then from various data sources, including the Census Bureau and our CRIS crash data, and automating a portion of the project scoring. Other portions of the scoring require us to review in person and use professional judgment from our subject matter experts at Txdot, but a portion of the scoring can be automated. And so we refined the interim weights and the criteria while we were developing this tool. We presented to the Bicycle Advisory Committee those criteria weight categories and sent out a survey for the BAC to provide feedback. And we used the weights we received from the BAC and averaged those with the weights that we had developed during the workshop. And then we did make a small adjustment to that. We increased the project readiness to criteria category to address limited funding availability. There is a 3-year window of when Txdot receives the funds, and that we need to obligate those funds. And so project readiness is important in the success of these projects. And so we want to have that weighted high enough to represent that importance, and make sure that the projects that are awarded funding are ready to be implemented as soon as they're awarded money. Next slide. So at the last BAC meeting, it's now the Bpac, but I'm referring to it as the BAC since that was the title at our last meeting. Action was taken in support of PTN's approach to administering the Txdot 2021 TA call for projects. We sent out that survey asking your feedback and prioritizing the evaluation categories. We received 8 responses, and then we took those, the average of the Bicycle Advisory Committee scores and averaged that with the workshop participants. And then, like I said before, made a small adjustment for the project readiness criteria category. Next slide. So this is the resulting evaluation criteria. Each safety, connectivity, accessibility, project readiness, those criteria categories were roughly equal in weight once we went through the process of averaging the criteria weights. And then if you look at equity, community support, and demand, the other 3 criteria categories, all of those together combined equal that next quarter of weight. So this is the graphic we'll be providing in the detailed application, along with the bullet points that you see under each criteria category that show a little more detail of the actual criteria that we're gathering information on and scoring. Each of those are defined in more detail in the program guide. So the project sponsors should have enough information to know what information we're looking for and what is being considered for scoring their projects. Next slide. And that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions or comments?
Any questions for Noah?
Just want to make sure I understand correctly. So after the survey, the criteria, like the weight distribution is almost the same, right? Is that the takeaway?
You want to go back a slide, Karen? Yeah, once we average the Bicycle Advisory Committee weights with the workshop weights, and then we adjusted that project readiness a bit, then it came out to equal, those 3 categories were roughly equal. And then the equity, community to support, and demand, once we combined those, they for the purposes of this illustration, that made up that other quarter of the weights. So
I understand now. Thank you for re-clarifying that. Understood. Well, good job. Is this an action item?
no, it is
Okay.
not on the agenda as an action item.
All right. Thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Carla, if I may, Rick, we have shared this information with the commissioners at this level of detail, and they didn't have any feedback for us at the time, which is usually a good sign. So just to let the committee know that they're getting the same level of information that our commissioners are.
Great, Eric, thank you. All right, no, we appreciate your presentation. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
All right, we are moving on to one of our last items, item 8, which is one of my favorite items in every meeting. It's updates from committee members on local and statewide issues. So I'm going to start at the top of our roster and just work our way down. Bobby, would you like to go first and tell us what's happening in El Paso?
Sure. Well, we continue to move forward on our CIP projects that involve bikeway and pedestrian components. But one of the things we have been working on, actually as a firm, we actually are working on the Pasadena Nordic trail. And a couple of weeks ago, we conducted we had a little 68 mile ride from Tornillo, Texas to Anthony, Texas. The purpose of the ride was to increase awareness of the planned trail and better understand the proposed route based on new and upcoming construction projects, the comfort level as a cyclist, and where signage and other trail amenities would be most effectively placed. We had reps from Txdot, Texan by Nature, the CRMA, Better Business Bureau, and the El Paso del Norte Health Foundation, and it was well attended. So over the next few years, the PDN Trail Advisory Committee will be conducting and coordinating closely with the El Paso County Water Improvement District to identify funding for other portions of the trail in hopes to create a waterfront trail where possible. And then we're just going to continue on with that program. But so we're excited to be a part of it, and we're looking forward to bigger and better things for El Paso.
Awesome. Thanks, Bobby. Bobby, if a 68-mile ride is just a little ride, I might be in trouble if I came to El Paso.
Just a little ride.
Just a little ride. All right. Next will be Chelsea. Chelsea, tell us what's happening in the Waco area.
Well, we're excited about one project that is happening. Construction finally started on the Washington Avenue 1 to 2-way conversion, and that's going to include a buffered bike lane on 2 sides. And that's a really important collector street that runs through our downtown and then connects to our uptown area. And it's been in the works for, I want to say, about 2 years now. We're very excited that construction has finally started on it. Now that this committee considers micromobility as part of its scope, I do want to mention that, again, the city of Waco has had a pilot scooter program in the works for almost a year now. In July, it'll be a year. And I do know that they're planning to have a user survey sent out. And we're also hoping to get access to some of the GIS data from that program. And from my perspective as a transportation planner, I'm really excited to see some of the GIS data to see what roads scooter users are choosing to use, to see if that's where we have our existing bicycle infrastructure, or they're roads that perhaps they just feel more comfortable on. So that's really exciting for us. And something that our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee and the MPO has been talking about, and we hope will be one of our projects for this year, is to look at wayfinding. So now that our urbanized area has more of a connected network of bicycle infrastructure on the ground, we think now it's time where we can start to look at wayfinding to connect folks who are using that bike lane, or to inform them of like how to get to destinations like Cameron Park or downtown or perhaps the university. So those are some things that we are looking forward to this year. Thanks.
Very cool. I would love to hear more about the wayfinding program. I'm sure lots of folks on the committee have dipped their toe into the wayfinding world. I know we've been asked to do a regional wayfinding guidelines. So Bonnie and Noah, maybe that's something in a future agenda we could have some speakers talk about wayfinding and what they're doing in their regions.
We'll add it to the list. Thanks.
Thank you very much. All right. Our next board member, Clint, do you want to tell us some projects or activities happening in the Houston area you can share?
Sure, I wrote down a couple things. Mostly just folks are keep chipping away at what they're working on. We've got 3 cycle stations that are still opening. I think they're getting close to the 2nd largest bike share system network. Don't quote me on that. But they are just continuing to expand and seeing record usage, which is great. One thing, just Chelsea mentioning the scooters, Houston has the city has a hesitancy to allow scooters and micromobility, particularly dockless, on the streets. And we recently have had private conservancies start to rent out scooters, and the city quickly said not allowed on sidewalks. So that's been interesting to follow. Not sure where it will land, but we've got a few more scooters on the roads, but they're not they're just being rented through a park conservancy. The city of Houston and Harris County continue to make progress on their bikeway projects, and so we're our network in certain parts of town is really starting to come together. If anybody is ever in Houston, please send me an email. I would love to show off some of our network. And then one thing that I think will be interesting, I learned about this week, maybe for this group and our conversations here, the Harris County Toll Road Authority, who owns and operates facilities, and it's really similar to Txdot. They will be starting to look at their facilities and their right of way to understand how they can better leverage the property that they own to connect pedestrian and bicycle destinations in the communities. I mean, they have some massive facilities all around the county. So that planning is just beginning, but I think it will be I'm really fascinated to see what they come up with, because like I said, they've got these giant, highway facilities really similar to Txdot. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach crossings and safety around those facilities and all that good stuff. So.
All right, thanks, Clint. All cool stuff. I'm thinking before the end of the year, we also need to come back and maybe have on the agenda a micro-mobility discussion. So who's got scooters, maybe a survey before the topic, but who's scooters, who's got who's got bike rentals, electric scooters, what's the state of where you've been? We had a huge wave of them in our region, and then they all went away, and we had 5 companies, and now there's kind of hints of one. And so I think there's been an evolution across the state and different communities. And so maybe we can share where that's at and where that's been. I think we could learn a lot from each other. And I know there's been some state working groups, and there were national working groups that I believe it was NACTO put together. So we had some people participate in that, and maybe some of y'all did as well. So there's a lot of different elements of this that we could discuss to get kind of up to speed about micromobility and maybe where it's headed. So Bonnie, add that to the list as well. That would be great.
Yeah, if I can just second that, I think that would be fantastic, especially because it feels like we've kind of hit a new equilibrium on the scooter front after just this, crazy expansion and point of inflection. And in particular, I'd be interested in hearing about how communities are intentionally trying to balance bike share with the prevalence of scooters, and whether anyone has been able to sort of reintroduce bikes after they sort of, bike usage plummeted dramatically with the appearance of the scooters. And I'm wondering if now folks have come up with any strategies to strategically reintroduce bike share and increase utilization there, even in the face of scooter availability. So.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Great. All right, Eddie, anything happening in the Cedar Park or Austin area that you could share?
I love that I'm not first in the alphabet or last in the alphabet, because I can totally poach what y'all are saying. Is that fair to say?
Nice
so
job,
anyways,
yes.
yes. So Clint, I'm going to be in Houston on April 24th, meeting with a fellow bike engineer person, and I would love to meet with you because I helped design and build some of those that you're writing on there, and I'd like to get your take on things. So can I reach out to you later?
Excellent. Just send me an email.
Awesome. And then I'm currently planning a ride here in Austin with engineers, and because we done one a couple of years ago, that's going to showcase the city of Austin infrastructure, because it's there's a lot of it, and that's going to be on May 15th. I will send something to our committee members if that's okay. Is that okay, Bonnie?
Go ahead and send it to us, and we will forward it.
Okay. And then from previous work with the city of Austin, I had worked with their bicycle advisory council and done some work with their interactive maps. They have all sorts of stuff. I'm not working with them right now, but I'm sure Txdot is already working with the city of Austin. Is that correct, Noah? Yes.
I believe we have their
link
to their interactive map.
Because they have all sorts of information available, because part of it was recognizing barriers and putting that in and making that into projects. And I know they're still doing that effort. And there's so much information about scooters and bike rentals. I went out this past weekend, and there's scooters and rental bikes all over the place. People are out and about, that's for sure. So it is along the lines of interest, you know, the CODA bike rides at the F1 track have been ramped up on Tuesdays, and that's huge. It used to be just a bunch of cyclists going fast, and now it's a few hundred people every Tuesday night of all ages, sizes, and shapes out there. It's really interesting. So if you're ever in town on Tuesday, you should go to CODA on Tuesday nights and ride on the track. You don't have to go fast. And then projects here in Williamson County, we finished another project with a 8-foot shared use path separate from the road here with Round Rock. And then with the RMA, there's projects going along the 183 corridor. Big one is kicked off. That'll be similar to the Mopac project. It will have bike and peg facilities. I'm certain they are coordinating everything with Txdot, and that has been a long time coming. The Wide Oak Hill project is also kicked off and it has similar facilities. So there's a lot going on in this town. It's in this area, so it's hard to keep up with everything. I can tell you anything that's going on in Williamson County, and I try to keep up with the city of Austin, but I'm pretty sure that Txdot's doing the same. So yeah, a lot going on here. It's busy. COVID is still a thing, but I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and hopefully y'all can too. So that's all I got. Be safe.
Great. Thanks, Eddie. Appreciate all that. Miss Ava, please tell us about the Brownsville area and what's going on with you all down there.
Yeah, Brownsville currently is having their public engagement process for a sidewalk and trails master plan. So a survey's been out there. They are going to have some open houses, but in the greater Rio Grande Valley, lower Rio Grande Valley area, we also are kicking up working with FHWA, Central Federal Lands Highway Division. I think I said that right. But we were awarded a while back. I think I presented to the Bpac that we got a Texas FLAP grant, a Federal Land Access Program. So we're now kicking off the feasibility study for a 21.5-mile trail that has the potential to connect 4 communities and 2 federal lands, National Park Service and U.S. Fish. That's exciting. They're going to be doing a field visit, the consultants that were contracted in May. Outside of that, we applied to the traffic safety grant that Txdot had a call for, and we were tentatively awarded. We need to make modifications to our grant application, but the potential to be awarded $41,500 to host trainings for law enforcement officers on CR3 reporting and just using CRISE data in that whole application. I want to get a working group started with our Bpac to kind of develop the content. But outside of the law enforcement training, we also, part of our objective of the grant is to have trainings for engineers, planners, designs, highlighting kind of traffic calming and these best practices that we know throughout the state and on the national level. And then the third objective for that grant is getting bike helmets, bike lights, and out into the community. Part of the modification, we applied to do a public service announcements, regional ones, but it was kind of ambitious for a 1-year goal to do all of it. And so we're reducing that from our objective. And then lastly, the Bpac, the RGVMPO, after the Txdot Transportation Commission amendments, we had postponed our program call. And so now we're just getting that back up and going. The Bpac just Wednesday approved opening that call for June and closing it in July, and hopefully being able to work with Txdot's tip revisions for November revisions. And I think that's all. I mean, we're ongoing with the bike ped count data program and other things. I know I need to reach out to Bonnie, Noah, and Carl here in the near future, but that's us. Thank you.
Exciting stuff. I have a question about your helmet and light distribution. Are y'all having to modify that any for COVID and how you make that available, or have y'all got that far yet and how that will work? Because we have some questions about our outreach items and materials and brochures, and are we going to do less of that, or we're not really sure yet?
Yeah, that's also going to be part of the modifications that I make, which is, I guess, instead of us hosting activities, it would be kind of finding already ongoing activities. So if there's like a state of the city or something else, that we would kind of either offer that to our municipalities, sections of it, And then a second idea was to incentivize law enforcement officers to come to the trainings or to attend virtually, because then they would get the materials as part of their bike rodeos and their efforts for outreach. So instead of us distributing them ourselves, we were going to hand them over to the local officials to do the distribution as they wanted to.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we're experimenting with our first drive-through public meeting where it'll be in a park and we're gonna have like stations you'd stop your car at, and then there's like things in bags and one thing that we're looking at, and another is having information areas in a library where people will get kits, and then they can, one big board with like dots are in your kit to put on maps and that kind of thing. Since we can't host traditional open houses quite yet, I'm interested in what other people are doing to get around some of this stuff. But cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Really good stuff. Mr. Frank, tell us about Laredo and how you guys are doing down there.
Well, we're doing really well. I think I mentioned at previous meetings, our local MPO just adopted our active transportation plan here. And now that that's up and going and we move toward implementation, what they did and decided to do is they basically took our Bike Laredo advocacy group, our meetings, and asked us to join their meetings, so that now the members of Bike Laredo have become their MPO's Active Transportation Committee. So what's really great about it is we still meet monthly, but half of the meeting is as the Active Transportation Committee that reports to the MPO, and then the other half is still our Bike Laredo meeting. So we still continue to have our advocates at the table with our city departments, with our local Txdot office. They're there as well in our school districts.
That's awesome.
And so we're very, very excited that we're moving that way. And really more personally on the national level, I'm just really happy, to see that our transportation secretary rides his bike to work and obviously fully supports active transportation. And I'm hoping we, as a state, are positioning ourselves with all these ongoing discussions of infrastructure funding, and hopefully that will come down to our state as well.
All right. Well, thanks, Frank. That incorporation of your committees is really cool. I can't wait to hear more about how that works out. All right, Jeff, anything in the Corpus Christi area that you want to share with everyone?
Hey, good morning. I don't have a ton to report here. We, I would say that our biggest push at the moment is trying to systematize how our local bike pedestrian committee gets to review and give input on city bond-funded city roadway reconstruction. Right now, that feels like it's happening on sort of a one-off basis, where committee members are vigilant on the status of different bond projects and intervene when they see an opportunity. And we're trying to figure out how to make that a systemic part of the way the city does business, so that that review is built into their basis of design and then ultimately into the design process with various consulting engineers. So I raise that in case anyone has had a similar experience and has suggestions. I'd welcome some input offline. But for our part, we do see ongoing and continued, slow but steady construction of bikeway facilities in accordance with the regional plan that came out of our MPO several years ago. So there is slow and steady progress. I think that we continue to miss opportunities for implementation and for fine tuning of design, because we haven't yet figured out how to make that review process part of the standard operating procedure. Not a whole lot else. We're still sort of suffering from COVID distractions and haven't quite figured out how to garner a lot of momentum in the face of resources being diverted other ways. I'm optimistic that we're sort of coming out of that period, and I hope that the next quarter is a more active one for us.
Good. Well, if you figure out the secret bullet on how to get into those bond conversations and get more funding for Biped, please let us all know. That's a problem I'm sure many struggle with in their communities. All right, great. Mike, anything in Austin specifically happening that you want to update the group on?
Here in Austin, we have a lot of ongoing work with CIP projects, particularly from the last two major bonds, the 2016 and the 2020. So a lot of protected bike lanes and shared use paths, urban trails and sidewalks going in from those two bonds. 2016 was our biggest infusion of money into those local mobility groups that we've ever had. And then 2020 topped that amount. So it's a lot to work through. It's a good problem to have, but yeah, lots to do. I was interested to hear how others are dealing with the public meetings during COVID. That was a big thing for us. You know, a year ago, we kind of halted on a number of projects, and I would say that set us back in some ways, you know, maybe 6 months before we got things figured out. But we're in probably a better place that we probably should have been at 5 years ago, honestly, of, you know, now we have everything online and, you know, our GIS story maps, and instead of a paper roll plot, we have, you know, all materials online, and projects where we might have, you know, small projects that we might have been lucky to get 50 people at a meeting. Now we're regularly getting, you know, several hundred people filling out a survey. So it's been a great thing that we'll probably take forward into the post-pandemic era as well, some of these lessons. So that's been great. And we are getting into our staffing up to make sure that we can deliver on these 2020 bond requirements. So that we've already been staffing. When I started about 6 years ago at the city, we had three designers for these type of active transportation projects. And now we're at 10 and 5 more on the way soon. So
That's awesome. Wow.
quickly staffing up to get this stuff done that people are expecting. Yeah, that's the big stuff. Just to the bike share thing that people brought up. Our previous B cycle is now Metro Bike. They got brought into as part of Cap Metro, which I think is going to be a really good thing because they are now, you know, reflective of how they should be used as, you know, supporting public transit. And I think that's going to lead to a lot of good partnerships of getting those stations where they're needed, you know, co-located by bus stops and new train stations, that kind of thing. So more to come with that.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks. Rick is not with us today, so we will then skip to Trent. Trent, anything in the Tyler area that's happening in the bike ped world?
I believe that Trent had to leave a few minutes early.
I'm seeing him right here on the screen.
I do need to leave, but I didn't want to leave because I wanted to hear everybody's updates and also give our own. We've got some exciting things happening in kind of greater Northeast Texas, Smith County specifically. This week on Monday, we kicked off our striping project that my predecessor, Billy Hibbs, helped initiate, and that is finally becoming a reality. It's basically a hub and spoke system with 11 spokes out to the downtown hub, 36 miles of bike and non-motorized lanes that have been created, and it's the first of its kind in East Texas. And it's going to take a minute to get done, but the fact is it started this week, so we're really excited about that. And the MPO is quite fired up, and which is great. I mean, we've got a long way to go in East Texas, but this is a good place to start. So other than that, it's just it's more of the same. We'll be looking beyond this striping project and really kind of what's next for Tyler and Greater East Texas. But it's exciting this week. So.
Yeah, that's great news to hear that's getting started. 36 miles is a lot. So I have cities that have worked for years and don't have that much out. So that's going to be huge for Tyler. Very cool. I can't wait to see it. All right. I think I'm the last one to go. In Dallas, Fort Worth, we've always got a couple of things brewing. We are in final negotiations with a consultant for a regional trail branding project for our Fort Worth to Dallas trail. This is 5 cities, and it's a focus on ecotourism, consistent signage, kind of creating a theme and how to draw people from all over the state and the country to do large events and to come check out this trail that can get you from downtown Fort Worth to downtown Dallas. So super excited about that. We have relaunched our Lookout Texans campaign, and we've sort of changed the tone this time. We're actually, our previous direction from our agency had been to kind of stay away from the bad side of accidents and tell more of the positives and why we should all work together. But I had a friend that was hit by a car in December as a pedestrian. She was in a crosswalk. She had a walk sign. And I said, we got to do something different, guys. I think the message has got to change. And so our director was completely on board. And so we canvassed the agency and friends and family on who's been hit by a car, if you're a pedestrian or a cyclist. And so she's told her story. We've got others telling their story. And so we're uploading those videos and those write-ups on our website. We had she was on our Channel 8 News with a news piece about pedestrian safety. And we have so many people walking in downtown Dallas and they think they're safe in a crosswalk. And so I was able to give some of the data we get from Txdot's Chris on that, that news piece as well, and just really make people aware that pedestrian safety is a huge issue. Texas being a focus state, Dallas and Fort Worth being focus cities, and some of y'all have those too. So that we're really excited about that. Another thing I want to share that you guys might be able to take advantage of is the Federal Highway Administration is hosting a series of roadway safety audit trainings for us. If you're interested in participating, I can send that information to Bonnie, and you don't have to be in DFW. They're all going to be virtual, but this is the second one that I think they've done in the country. So roadway safety audits are going to be our next step for our regional pedestrian safety plan. We're going to send out teams of our folks, city staff, Txdot staff, county, maybe could be school district, could be transit, depending on the location of our priority safety corridors for pedestrians. So how to do a roadway safety audit, what you collect, how you develop a team, how you document conditions in the field, all of those things. Federal Highways has got some great training on that. So we're going to host that for all of our cities and our engineers and parks people or whoever wants to participate. So if you want to be part of that training, let me know, or I'll send it to Bonnie and you can sign up. I think we have a couple of spaces left. But secondly, if you want to host this training for your part of the world, Federal Highway has been very open to, they don't charge us anything for it. Getting on the schedule, you know, I think it's worth the conversation. And Stephen Recky may still be on the phone, so he may be like, but I think it's a great opportunity and you should ask if it's something that you'd want to do in your part of the state. We have recently been taking big batches of what we call COVID supported funding for infrastructure investment to get jobs and projects moving. And recently we put about $18 million on bike trails and a couple of sidewalk projects. So that was kind of unexpected, but very exciting. And it's some of our big regional projects. Like we've got a trail that'll get you from Denton, Texas to Dallas. And there's some gaps in the middle that we're starting to fund. We have a project Midlothian to Waxahachie that we just funded 2 huge sections of. So anything that's a big regional connection where our priorities, Fort Worth is looking at a 55-mile loop within the city of Fort Worth. And so this did a big section of that. So that's exciting for our program. Our regional Peds pedestrian safety plan, we spent about a year and a half, almost 2 years working on it. Txdot was great. They provided us some tools and has really assisted through that process. That'll be posted by the end of the month. So we're going to all of our boards and committees. We hope to start a bike version of that later in the year. But it's going to be adopted as part of our long-range mobility plan. It'll be an appendix or an addendum. So it has a little bit more flexibility to be updated and changed, but then it's referenced in our long-range plan when it comes to priorities for funding and infrastructure. And then we're also putting policies together that we're taking to our elected officials about pedestrian safety and where they come in the hierarchy of roadway safety as the most vulnerable users. So if you're interested in that, check by the end of the month on our website, or if you need the link, let me know. And I can give you that, that document if you're interested in creating something similar in your region. And then finally, we've kind of got a cool, if you have transit in your community, we awarded some money for one of our transit agencies. We have 3 transit agencies in DFW. So Trinity Metro is on the Fort Worth side, and we gave them $1 million for bus stop ADA accessibility compliance and accommodations. And so they're like, we don't know where to start with this. We have 2,100 signs where you're standing in the mud, basically. So we put together a GIS process where we prioritized, we digitized all the stops, and then we created sort of this layering system of environmental justice, ridership, large employers, medical and government resources, and kind of where people are going, safety and some other things, and then kind of came out with a ranking and a hierarchy for all of those projects. And we think we can get almost 350 pad sites built and with ADA accessible curb ramps so that people can get to the bus stop location and then easily or more easily board the buses. So that's kind of exciting. If you're interested in that methodology or how we selected those projects and prioritized them, we've got for everything that we do from a data perspective, we create a methodology sheet on it so it can be replicated. So if you guys want that, let me know and I can send it to you. I think that's it in a nutshell. There's a lot of cool stuff going on across the state. If anything people talked about, you're interested in like bigger presentations or coming back to the committee for more information, please let Bonnie and Noah know. They put together sort of like the dream list of topics for the next several months and can kind of like work with folks for presentations, or maybe several people are working on some things and we could have joint presentations. That would be really cool as well. All right, so, and speaking of that, that leads into item 10, great segue I didn't even plan for, a discussion of agenda items for future BAC meetings. And this is an action item to give Noah and Bonnie that kind of clear direction on what we're looking for. I did hear from the committee that we were interested in micromobility, and I threw out, I'm interested in branding and what other people are doing on that. Are there any other topics that folks want to get in the roster or in the lineup to come back to another meeting on? And it doesn't have to be the things we've discussed today. You may have another idea or another project that you want to highlight. Just let us know. So any ideas? Don't all talk at once.
This is Frank.
Yeah.
Kind of following up, I guess, on my the way I ended my last topic about what's happening around the state, and with this infrastructure package coming down, or supposedly coming down, do we have a way that to see how we as Txdot are positioning ourselves with like projects that are possibly ready to go? Or I know one of the examples could be the Texas Tourism Trail Network. I don't know a lot about how the funding mechanisms work, but the opportunity to, to accelerate that, or any other projects that we're looking at the state level.
I'm going to turn that over to Eric, maybe to answer, or Bonnie, to see how that could be incorporated in a future topic if it can be.
Let me take that back, Frank. We'll take that back to Txdot administration. I'm sure there's a overall game plan for infrastructure funding, and depending on the discretionary opportunities that might yield as well. I would have to believe that under the current administration that projects with bicycle and pedestrian elements to them will be looked on very favorably. So I think that's good. Strategically, we need to talk about that ahead of time as a department to make sure it's front and center. I think the new design guidelines that came out certainly promote that thought as well.
Frank, I would encourage you to coordinate with your MPO and elected officials. Had some elected officials in our region reaching out to the MPO to see if we have priority projects. Earmarks are back, right? Good news, bad news. So it's going to be who you know and who knows you. So you've got to get your elected officials engaged in that conversation as well. Of course, public agencies can't lobby, Txdot can't, MPOs can't, but cities, well, let me rephrase that. Certain public agencies can't lobby, some can. So cities have lobbyists in some regards. So you'll want to start thinking about that from that perspective and who can connect with who, I would suggest. Not to share with you all of our secrets, because of course Dallas-Fort Worth has some good projects, but when we all build and we all grow, then I think our entire state benefits. So
Okay.
Other ideas, any specific topics that you guys would like to see come back over the next couple of months or the next 3 or 4 meetings?
I also wrote down the neighborhood streets concept that Clint mentioned earlier.
Okay. Neighborhood streets. And then we do need to bring back the online mapping and how that would work or not work, or what the vision of that would be or what it needs to be as a tool to be useful for people's needs. I don't know that maybe that's like a smaller agenda item. And then really, I think also the plan for the strategic plan update, the report out, and kind of a schedule for that or what that might look like. If the staff could share that with the committee and where we're headed with that, that would be, I think, really beneficial as well, because I love having a framework and a guiding document. I think that's really served us well to kind of like have something we're shooting towards. And so updating that document, showing the success, and then showing where we're headed just keeps us on track and gives us some things to pull from and just keep going as we start checking them off the list. All right, well, it's not the end of the conversation. If you have other ideas, feel free to send those to Noah and Bonnie, but what we will do is take action to move these forward today as a committee, and that kind of gives them some guiding direction over the next couple of meetings towards the finishing up this year, and even they may carry on to next year. So can I have a motion? Well, I'm gonna make a motion that we move forward to approve this tentative agenda or priority topics for upcoming meetings. I'm gonna make that motion, and can I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby. If everyone would unmute really quick, and if you're in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I
Thank you. Anybody not in favor? Likewise. Speak now, forever hold your peace. All right, great. Thank you, everybody. That motion carries. And so it looks like our Txdot team has some direction, and we know they're going to bring back some exciting agendas. With that, it is now 11:33. Thank you for all attending today. We are going to adjourn this April 9th meeting of our first Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Great day.